Today is Monday, Tu B'Av, Tafshin Ayin Daled. We are in Teres Menachem, Sefer Mamar, Tafshin Yud Aleph, Tafshin Yud Beis, in the Mamar of the second day of Shavuos, Tafshin Yud Beis, Dibra Maskal B'Shor Shehikdimu. We are on the top of page Shin Ches. By popular demand, we're going to go back, at least orally, to revise what the Rebbe is trying to explain here, and I'll do my best. The Rebbe is explaining the idea of the two crowns that Yidden received at Matan Torah. And the Rebbe asked, he explained that the special quality, the specialness for which the Yidden deserved and received the two crowns was for the fact that they said Naasa, we will do, before they said Nishma, we will understand. So in other words, so it works like this. They received the crowns, they received two crowns, one for Naasa and one for Nishma, but only because they said Naasa before Nishma. So in other words, you can't separate one from the other. If that's the case, says the Rebbe, there should have been a third crown. There should be three crowns, one for Naasa, one for Nishma, and one for saying Naasa before Nishma. So the Rebbe explained that indeed there are three crowns. But the third crown, Hashem sort of keeps for himself. What does that mean? That he gave to them and he keeps for himself. So the Rebbe began to explain that within the life-giving force of godliness to the world, there are two levels. There are the pnimi, the immanent elements of godliness, and then there are the makif, the transcendent elements of godliness. And in order to understand that, the Rebbe began to explain Seder Hishtalshelus. Seder Hishtalshelus, the chain order of creation. And he explained it's called Hishtalshelus from the expression of Shalshelis, a chain link, a link chain, where one link is connected to the other one. And there are aspects within Seder Hishtalshelus that are more connected one to another, and there are aspects that are more distant. But nevertheless, they're all part of the same framework. So for example, chain A that's linked to chain B, the bottom of chain A is directly linked to the top of chain B. Whereas the top of chain A, link A and link B. The top of link A is not directly in contact with the bottom of link B. Whereas the bottom of link A is directly in contact with the top of link B.
Why are we traveling in this area? Why is he?
We're going. He wanted to go back.
No. Why is the Rebbe talking about chains and links?
Because he's trying to explain Seder Hishtalshelus, because he wants to explain the pnimi aspects of Seder Hishtalshelus and the makif aspects of the within Seder Hishtalshelus. So he says in Seder Hishtalshelus, take for example a chain, a link chain that has 10 links. Okay, because we have 10 spheres, so let's call it 10 links. So the top, the very top of the highest link and the very bottom of the lowest link are the most distant parts, and indeed are very, very distant one from another. Chochmah to Malchus is distant. Even more so, Chochmah Atzilus relative to Malchus of Asiya is even more distant, greatly distant, vastly distant. Be'ein areich, without relation. Yet, when you talk about any of the spheres relative to the Ein Sof, right? So Chochmah and Atzilus, Chochmah of Atzilus and Asiya of and Malchus of Asiya equalize relative to Ein Sof. Right? So there are the idea that Rebbe is trying to explain is that there are degrees in distance as well. There are degrees in Ein Arich, depending on whether or not it's within the framework of Seder Hishtalshelus or it's beyond Seder Hishtalshelus. Then the Rebbe went on to say another point. He explained that this is the idea of Igulim and Yosher. Yosher means the Eir Pnimi, the divine energy that clothes itself immanently within the various realms, within the various inhabitants of those realms, within the various creatures of those realms, whereas Igulim remains transcendent. The Rebbe added another point, that notwithstanding the fact that Igulim remain transcendent, Igulim are transmitted from beyond the Tzimtzum, through the Tzimtzum, via the Kav, within Seder Shtalshalos. However, they are transferred in a transcendental manner.
So they stay Igulim.
They remain Igulim, precisely.
They're a sphere, they remain like a
They
sphere.
remain a sphere, they remain Igulim, and that's why when the Kav comes down, as it says in Kabbalah, it doesn't go straight down from after the Tzimtzum, and then step by step through via the whole Seder Shtalshalos, but it comes down, Vinis Agel, and it curves into a sphere. Then it goes down a little more, and it curves into another sphere, and so on and so forth. So in every realm, you have the Igul element and you have the Yosher element.
With regard to the relationship now, from the Ein Sof to the Igulim, you said that the relationship, obviously there is an equivalence between Chochmah B'Tzilis and Malchut Asiyah in terms of that relationship to the Ein Sof, implying that there is some form of relationship between Chochmah B'Tzilis and
Malchus Asiyah, certainly.
Now, with regard to the Igulim and that relationship,
The Igulim and which of the relationship? The Igulim
the
and
Ein Sof,
correct. Okay, so the relationship between Igulim and the Ein Sof is a greater one than the relationship between Malchus Asiyah and Chochmah Atzilus. Because the relationship between Malchus Asiyah and Chochmah Atzilus is only in as much as they are part of Seder Shtalshalos. But you certainly cannot compare human intellect to the divine intellect of Atzilus. Even though they're both intellect, right? But Chochmah Lakis is a different. It's almost or maybe as distant as an animal relative to a human being. They're related because they're all part of the same sphere of existence, but you can't compare. It's a different species. It's a different marus, right? But they are related insofar as they are part of the same framework.
So
They inhabit the same
where we talk about
territory, so to speak.
Atzilus down to Asiyah and Chochmah down, all that is Yosher.
Correct.
Igulim
So-
do not have names? Or do you have the
They-
same
they
name?
should.
No, so hold on, but that's important. So Igulim is the level of Keser. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Yeah, Kesser.
So
Yeah.
right, and so and
Wait, I want to
Okay.
conclude with this. That's the question that he asked. Kabbalah and Chassidus mentions something called Hishtalshlus Haksorim Zemizeh.
yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Right? Now, Hishtalshlus Haksorim Zemizeh means that the relationship between the Igulim one to another, irrespective of the fact,
It's closer.
is closer because they do remain the same Ahus. There are gradations within, they are like shades within the same Mahus.
But is there some form of tzimtzum between the igul which surrounds Malchus of Atzilus and the igul which surrounds
Certainly.
Chochmah of Bria?
Absolutely.
So it's Keser.
Absolutely there
Igulim
is.
Keser,
Between every
it is.
Olam, between every world, there is a Tzimtzum.
Yeah.
However, there are certain Tzimtzumim that are greater and certain Tzimtzumim that are lesser. Meaning to say, for example, the ultimate Tzimtzum is the Tzimtzum Rishon, the first constriction,
Yeah.
where the constriction is such that it's Mebchinas Siluk, where the Ein Sof is, so to speak, removed. The distance between the Tzimtzum between Atzilus and Bria is also of similar nature because the transition from Atzilus to Bria is much vaster. It's like Yesh Ma'ayin. That's what Bria denotes. Bria denotes ex nihilo, something from nothing. As the Ramban says in the beginning of Bereshis is boro, as opposed to Yotzar. Yotzar means you take something that was already there in raw form and you shape it. Whereas Bria means creating something new. So the Tzimtzum between Atzilus and Bria is a greater one than, for example, the tzimtzum between Bria and Yetzirah, and so on and so forth. However, just like we said concerning the first tzimtzum, that the Ein Sof Shalifnei HaTzimtzum, the Ein Sof from beyond the tzimtzum, goes via the tzimtzum through the kaf into Seder Shtalshus, but travels with the Maiver, only passes through, and therefore it remains igulim. So too, when you talk about that repeats itself throughout the whole Seder Shtalshus. So when you go from Atzilus to Bria, of course there's a tzimtzum, and that eagle that's in the sphere of Atzilus passes through that tzimtzum into Bria and becomes subsequently the eagle of Bria. It also passes with Derech Maiver. Just it passes through and does not clothe itself and take on the trappings of that.
But it still undergoes a tzimtzum.
It's still yes, and therefore that's the point that everyone's making in this chapter. It goes through the tzimtzum, and therefore, although it remains makif, although it remains transcendent, although it remains igulim, and it only passes through, as it were, and it doesn't have the full experience of the tzimtzum like the kav or like the pnimi of Atzilus traveling down to Bria. Nevertheless, it does have some effect. And what is that effect? You end up with two sides to the Ein Sof. The Mayim Elyonim aspect of it and the Mayim Tachtonim aspect of it. Water being the metaphor for Igulim, earth being the metaphor for Yesher. Earth, where the fragmentation, this Chalkos is greater, and Mayim it's far less because everything is covered and you don't see it, and so on and so forth.
And when you're using the moshel, that would apply in Atzilus as well, in terms of Mayim and Achar or not? Or in Bria? Or only in Yetzirah and Asiyah?
Generally speaking, you probably could apply it to the others as well.
Yeah, that's where I got confused.
But he's talking about, in general, you're talking about these two modes of Oyer, of revelation. Makif and Pnimi, Igul and Yesher, repeats itself, is a template that repeats itself throughout Seder Shtalshalos. So here, he's speaking in general terms. In fact, he is breaking it down, because over here in this Ois, he does say that you certainly find the difference in Atzilus between, for example, Spheris and Malachim. And he says even in Bria you will have this difference between Spheris and the Malachim, for example, right? Even though the Spheris of Bria are lower than the Spheris of Atzilus, in the sense that Atzilus they're all the emanations, and later on they're already in the form of Bria.
Right.
Continue, Mr. tomorrow.